Okay, and welcome to today's podcast, Scrum for Marketing. My name is Dave West. I'm the host and compere, I guess by accident, CEO here at Scrum.org. I'm on with my two musketeers on this podcast. We've got Dave Carmichael from Avanade.
Hello there.
And Simon Jones also has joined us today as well. Simon, would you like to say hi?
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
And he's from Synergy, he's an analyst covering this topic, and so it's great to have the three of us as always here. The previous podcast, we talked a little bit about the role of Agile in marketing and the tensions around that. We talked about an operating model in the last podcast, and today we're actually going to focus on a role or a responsibility around Agile and Scrum, and that's of the product owner. There's been a lot of confusion around that with respect to marketing. To set some context, the reason why we have a product owner in Scrum is because of empiricism. The Scrum is, inherently empirical. This idea of you can't solve complex problems with a traditional plan model because you don't know what the problem is until you've started working on it, etc. So empiricism and empirical process, scientific method is at the heart of Scrum. Now, the product owner is a response to the need for a Scrum team to make decisions and deliver stuff, because ultimately, until you start getting feedback into the loop, it becomes very tricky. So when Ken Schwaber was and Jeff Sutherland were working on Scrum, they found that organizations had an inherent bias not to make decisions. So often teams were frozen in this sort of like, well, we're going to do it all. So they ended up trying to do massive chunks of work. Nobody really wanted to make a decision about what was more of a priority than others, Okay, pick your top one. Well, I want them all. That kind of thing happened. Consensus decisions, decision groups, and it became an absolute nightmare to actually get into this empirical process. So a product owner was created, the role initially called Agile Product Manager, interestingly, became product owner to emphasize this important ability to make decisions and to drive progress, to determine value so the team can get working. Now, the benefit of an empirical process, as you can imagine, is that you get the observation in the case of Scrum at the end of the sprint review. So even though the product owner is making decisions, they're doing it in a transparent way. Work is being delivered. People get to review it, provide feedback. And the worst you've wasted is the time of that sprint. So hence the product owner role. Now, does that really lend itself to marketing, this idea of a single decision maker? We all know that marketing is inherently sort of a political kind of discipline within most organizations. Everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's trying to, push their product or their particular strategy or their particular group or geography or and the like. So is it possible to have a product owner, or actually is it a good thing? Now, Dave, you've been working at this at Avanade and wrestling with this. Talk us a little about your journey around product ownership.
I shall. Yeah, it's been an interesting one, and it's still continuing, I have to say. We started our journey in September 2015 in terms of Avanade moving to Agile marketing, and we struggled with the role of the product owner, not the concept, but how we would make it work within marketing. And I'll explain why. I think in a software development world, that it's much more obvious who the product owner is to some extent. They're usually the one working with engineering on the roadmap for the software, they're capturing requirements, etc., etc. And the idea of them being responsible for value optimizer and creating a backlog, product backlog as we would call it, or a list of things that need to be done, for those who are familiar with that terminology, it's a natural role. In marketing, though, it's different, or it certainly felt different to us at the time, shall I say, because it's important that we collaborate and when we talk. Marketing people are good at talking, and we work together to try and work out what the best way forward is. So we struggled with this notion of a single person who was responsible for managing the product backlog, the list of things that we were to do. And our global Scrum coach, a guy called Carol Damon at the time, we spoke to him about this, and he said, okay, we'll make some flexibility within Scrum to enable you to do this. And I'd also add that the other thing that we had an issue with is that the people whom the budget ultimately rolled up to, which is also a segment of what the product owner owns is responsible for, were our executives in marketing, the people who ran corporate communications or the people who ultimately owned our campaigns and things like that. We considered that they were far too busy to jump on these daily scrums or these sprint planning meetings and everything else. So, we kind of positioned that. And of course, we now know that they don't have to join every scrum and things like that, but that's another story. So we agreed that we would have this, what we called the Scrum product owner. It could be more than one person within the people who are doing the work, which is, of course, quite sacrilege in Scrum to do that. But we did that. And
sorry, I'm just feeling a little nauseous at the moment, Dave, but yes, come.
Yeah, I apologize for the heartburn I'm giving you here, Dave. But we kind of made it work quite successfully for a while. We rolled that out, having failed to use a single product owner, and we trained the majority of our marketing organization. But we also created this concept that exists in Scrum of the Nexus product owner. And, the Nexus is a term used for scaled Scrum, or the way that you can scale Scrum to, 40 development teams, possibly even more on a good day. So we let our executives be the Nexus product owner, being that they were ultimately the ones for the vision, ultimately the ones for the budget, but they would empower, what we call the Scrum team product owners to do what they do, which is kind of how we operated. So it was adapting Scrum so that it worked for us. But we did start to run into some conflict in terms of, when we were looking at certain things that we were using Scrum for. It comes back to what the product owner is responsible for, which is the vision of the product. And the conflict occurred because there wasn't one clear owner of the vision of the product, and that could be the brand, it could be the campaign, it could be something else. And as this conflict was starting to become more apparent to us, it just so happened I went and did the product owner training and refreshed myself from the Scrum.org Kool-Aid. And there was a great slide on there that said, in that training, that said, who is your product owner, and the product owner is. And the product owner kind of went from being a scribe to a proxy to a business person to being a sponsor to entrepreneur, I think was ultimately the one. And it struck me that there is a lot more flexibility in who the product owner is. Plus, the product owner certainly doesn't have to join every of the 15-minute Scrum planning meetings. They're certainly not part of that process. They don't have to be part of that. They have to have some involvement in the sprint planning meetings, but they don't even have to be there for all of that. They don't have to be the person who daily looks at the product backlog and updates it. They can almost delegate some of that. So it struck me that we've been doing this wrong and that we should reassess the role of the product owner. And we've now flipped it again back to a single product owner for the reasons I talked about that had created the conflict to avoid that. And we're rolling that back out now and actually giving the product owner a bit more flexibility to the extent of, to what extent they manage the backlog. Others can get involved with that, but ultimately the responsibility and ownership of the backlog is with that single product owner.
So basically, you've gone through the sort of classic evolution of, hang on a minute, well, we've got these teams, they need some sort of leadership. The execs are far too busy and important to get involved in that. Therefore, let's find a sort of proxy for that, who then manages their time, et cetera, et cetera. And also then let's sort of make it focused on the work that they're doing. So you have the handoff, et cetera. And then you've realized that maybe still having some sort of clear accountability for the whole thing, that whole product in inverted commas, is important, which is interesting. So Simon, what do you see at Sirius that the ownership, management, leadership of your Scrum teams or your Agile teams, doesn't have to be doing Scrum, do you find this a common problem?
I think the way we see it is we see different product owners depending on what part of marketing they're doing it. And I think that's fundamentally a problem, because if the product owner owns the value that's delivered, essentially the value to the user, it's the definition of what is the product owner in marketing. And we have organizations that look at a product owner around we're developing something for the web, and we have a different product owner that may be doing it around a particular other component of marketing, as opposed to looking at it the other way. If I look at where organizations do it well, they have a product owner that owns the value to the organization as well as the user, which I know is not a great answer, but if you look at marketing's role as being a key component of the revenue engine of an organization, they are there to own value, and that value is to contribute net new business or profitable business to the organization. And that covers all digital, non-digital, all the different components that go into build that product. And I think that's where we tend to see success is when that product owner has that overall ownership across the boundaries, which is definitional within Agile, right? Is that you have cross-functional teams. So I think it's the idea of having senior management is having that overall value and understanding. I totally get and I totally understand, but I also understand that you need someone who owns it all the time and is willing to kind of light up the organization that's there to deliver it. And that's not always going to be your most senior people in the marketing organization. To use a really bad paraphrasing, if you're going to be a product owner, you need to be a wicked product owner, which is fairly relevant at the moment, is it not?
Probably. Okay, so that's interesting, because often you do see, in a my experience, large organizations, and I'm no marketing expert, you guys are, so help me here, but in large organizations, often you have somebody that does digital campaigns, somebody that does press campaigns, somebody that does, you have all these things. So the same customer or the same prospect, the same human being or persona or whatever we call them, is being touched in an appropriate way, but touched by all these different people in your org. So then you have to have some sort of oversight to ensure brand consistency, you have to, all this other stuff has to start becoming, standards have to apply, messaging has to be communicated throughout this thing. And then you have to build a process to ensure that is enforced, because you don't want to be saying to a customer, you don't want to be saying the new skinny jeans are back on one campaign and then saying, no, it's all flares on the other. You're like, oh my God, we can't, even though you may sell skinny jeans and you may sell flares and they're to the same customer, you'd obviously have to build a campaign that said something like, use the jeans that fit the mood or something, whatever. I don't know.
Wow.
God, I don't know why I went down there.
Yeah, this is why you're not in marketing.
Exactly. See, this is the reason why. Though I'm wearing sort of like granddad, what's it called, father jeans today or whatever, daddy jeans.
Yeah, dad jeans.
That's exactly
so
why. I still think I look cool. But anyway,
flared at the top and tight at the bottom.
That's exactly it. They're increasingly tight at the top as well. But anyway, so my point is that what you're saying is actually make it a lot simpler. Get clear, aligned ownership. Get a product owner that owns it. Might not be a senior person, might be an empowered, whatever, some other person. And you sort of empower them. And it can take a lot of complexity out of the processes and systems. And you allow them to engage directly with that customer and own all the stuff that's engaging with that customer. You build teams around that customer. It might be multiple teams because you may still have specialisms, digital, print, whatever. And then you weave that into a value proposition. And because you've got that one person, you don't need necessarily all that oversight.
Yeah, and this kind of idea. I mean, you hit the nail on the head in terms of, and you're using the word campaign, which is right. But we're very clear in terms of what a campaign is at Sirius. And the campaign is a definition, an agreement between the product team, the sales team, and the marketing team that says this is one of our 2 or 3 big plays for the year, and it's based around a buyer need. And that's an important thing to understand, is it's based around that buyer need. In your case with jeans, it's them to go outside and they keep their legs warm and look fashionable as they walk along the street. And that's one side of it. But the same side of it, fulfilling that buyer need, having that product owner, that program owner, that campaign owner, they fulfill that need, but that gets them to the organization's need, which is to generate demand. And that includes doing brand awareness, that includes reputation, that includes demand creation, that includes sales enablement. And if you don't have somebody who understands all of those, you're going to get exactly what you say, which is you're going to get disjointedness in that buyer journey. And that buyer journey is 15, 16 touches from the beginning when they realise they've got a need to when that need is fulfilled at the end of it. So I think that's why that product owner, that campaigner, that program owner, however we're going to decide to call these things and whichever role they're playing within that marketing space, that's why that person needs to own that from soup to nuts.
Yeah.
And why it's such an important part of the of marketing. Probably I would suggest is probably the most important role in marketing if an organization is moving to Agile.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's an incredibly important role. David, alignment to customers, simplifying your structure, is that what you've been doing?
Yes.
Is that ultimately what you've been doing?
Yeah. And I just want to make one more point before I move on. I think what we're very aware of as well is, and I think this again is a difference with software development, is that obviously we want our software developers to be relatively creative, not too creative in the code that they're writing. Do you know what I mean? And whereas with marketing, we absolutely do want the development team, the people actually doing the work for the campaign, to be as creative as they possibly can. We don't want them to feel that the vision and therefore the creativity is removed from the development team or the marketing people because there is one product owner. That's a really important distinction with marketing, I think. Go on.
I was going to say, and that's the reason why, hopefully, you describe the work that the team's going to be doing from a product owner perspective in terms of the outcomes that you seek, not in terms of how they deliver on those outcomes.
Exactly.
Thus allowing teams to take clear ownership for that. And that's actually true for software as well.
It is, you're right. Yeah. No, you make a very valid point. And when we've been training, and talking to marketing people about this single product entity, that concern has been raised with us, but aren't we empowered to be creative? Absolutely, you are. Yeah. We don't want you to think, and you definitely don't want to be going back to the product owner, the campaign owner, and asking them to provide feedback on, should I use this image or that image on an hourly basis, because you probably won't be enrolled for very long. So, yeah, they are still very much empowered to deliver the increment, as we would say, in the way that they feel is appropriate in the sprint. So, yeah. So just going back to your other point that you asked me, Dave, if you want to go back to that, it was more the streamlining of marketing, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have definitely seen improvements there, and the people that have done the training with us and that execute the sprints now and have been doing for 2-3 years, we find processes streamlined. And I think one of the biggest improvements that we've seen, I talked in one of the earlier podcasts about getting more skin in the game from other parts of the business. That's been a clear benefit. But I think from a streamlining perspective, it's been the definition of done and the acceptance criteria that you might use around PBIs. Certainly in many organizations, the work that marketing is doing, we work with other parts of the business. It might be sales or subject matter experts to get their input into something. And then historically, it can be difficult to get something signed off because you're working with busy people, or they just can't make up their minds, or you end up getting conflicting viewpoints on things. And somebody wants it this way, somebody wants it that way, and the time just ticks by in order to get something over the line. And we've learned from using Scrum that we want feedback from a wide viewpoint to give us feedback so that we can be transparent and inspect and adapt what we're doing, as empiricism is all about. But in terms of signing it off, no, we don't want all of those people to sign it off either and tell us it's done. So it's brought a lot more discipline into the defining what the definition of done is, has brought a lot more discipline into how we get things finished and what finished and done means. And that has helped us streamline of what we do in marketing. And as a consequence, we get things done faster. And therefore, we deliver value to the business faster, which is what Agile's all about.
Cool. So I know we're trying to keep this to the sort of 20, 25 minute, we're approaching our time. To summarize, I think there's some of the key messages, and please shout out if I get this wrong, Simon and Dave. Number one is that this clear alignment, this sort of product ownership ultimately requires some sort of alignment inside the organization to, we would argue, and Simon made a very strong point, to customers and to potential customers, prospects, whatever you want to call it. And thus building your organization around those customers and the journeys that they are on is crucial, because that reduces a lot of complexity. Ultimately, the product owner doesn't do everything around defining, oh my gosh, we need to have it all in magenta or whatever. They are very much responsible for defining the value or the outcomes that they seek with that buyer in that context, in that interaction. Therefore, they define value and the order of value and the structure of it. They don't do all the creative stuff. They've made it a very strong point, I think, around the creativity still resides within the team or teams. So building an organization focused on the customer, focused on the buyer, focused on their journeys that they're at, trying to ensure that the product owner steps away from some of the minutiae, some of the creative minutiae, I hate to use that word, I'm not even sure I can, and drives this sort of direction, this vision, this clarity of vision, so the teams can get on with it and deliver rapidly. And Scrum provides some of the structures to simplify that process to do that. Is that an adequate summary, Simon, Dave, do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's good. And I think too, the one thing I would add to that is when we look at where you do software development, there are standards you have. You will use, you're going to use Perl, you're going to use GitHub to store your code, you're going to code in this way, you're going to write it up in this way and everything. And those are those elements that sit around within marketing. So, this is the font we're going to use for this. This is how we express our brand voice. They're all standards, and that shouldn't prevent those teams from being creative, but they're being creative within a context.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's cheaper and faster and easier for them. Therefore, it's easy to get stuff out if you follow those standards, etc., which is the best carrot kind of model for standards ever. Anyway, well, that's today's podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. I've tried to keep it within, I've broken the time box again. Damn it. It's so hard. It's so hard because these two gentlemen, Simon, David, have got so much to say about this topic. And I think we're just sort of starting this journey, which is awfully exciting. So thank you for joining. My name's Dave West. I've been your host today. I'm sure I'll talk to you again very soon and on our next podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
This podcast is copyright of Avanade, the leading provider of innovative digital and cloud services, business solutions, and design-led experiences.